From WeFirst and Goal 17 Media, welcome to Lead with We. I'm Simon Mannering, and today I'm joined by Jostein Solheim, Group CEO of Health and Wellbeing at Unilever, where he also led the re-radicalization of the activist ice cream brand Ben & Jerry's. And today we'll talk about how to walk your talk as an activist brand in ways that drive business growth, and how to navigate today's challenging cultural landscape in terms of when to stand up and speak up as a brand, and how a global enterprise and an activist brand can work together and add value to everyone. So Jostein, welcome to Lead with We.
Thank you, Simon. I'm happy to be here.
It's so good to see you. I think we first met at a Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit years ago, and we've chatted since, but how are you feeling about this new year? Here we are in 2022. We've had this crazy couple of years with COVID. Like, how are you feeling? You know, you've got this new role. Are you feeling optimistic?
You know, I am a prisoner of my own optimism. But even us diehard optimists, I gotta say, get a little bit of a hit as you're coming into the year ready to go, and then we get a new variant, and we just got to hold back a few more months before we can get out there. But I sort of feel that we're starting to work out the cycle here, and that I'm still hopeful that we will be out of this next wave soon.
Right? It feels like we're slowly having to carry less and less a weight as it all becomes a little bit more normalized. And you know, you've had this storied career at Ben & Jerry's and now at Unilever. And I want to start at the beginning, because there are those people out there who obviously have heard of Ben & Jerry's, but to them on the face of it, it's an unlikely coupling, this global enterprise with so many brands and this sort of iconic activist Ben & Jerry's. Why did Unilever reach out to Ben & Jerry's in the first place? Can you tell us that?
Well, you know, like all good things, it was a little bit driven by competition. So as the Unilever is the world's biggest ice cream player. Back then, Nestle was the other big player. Nestle signed an agreement with Häagen-Dazs, which basically left Ben & Jerry's, as a potential partner in the sort of super premium ice cream market. So Unilever approached Ben & Jerry's during a quite a tumultuous period of Ben & Jerry's, where they were having some internal disagreements,
right?
And after a very long process, came to an agreement.
Yeah, I love it. A very long process. I mean, you've got personalities, you've got company culture, you've got the legal component, and you're sort of trying to like dock in space these two entities. How would you characterize that process in hindsight? What's it like when a fiercely independent company that had a lot of autonomy in its own right and really kind of steered its own ship, kind of how does it sort of integrate to a systems-driven enterprise?
Well, interestingly, it didn't really integrate. That was part of the deal. So the deal was really very structured and actually very legal and very formal. So what it did was a very fat contract. But what it really set out was the sort of forerunner to B Corps. So it set out a governance model which ensured that the independence, the social mission, the core values, the foundation, all these elements were actually very structurally addressed in the acquisition agreement, and there was a formal process, to follow.
Oh, that's interesting. So, you know, a lot of young companies and founders want to protect that secret sauce when they face an acquisition opportunity and so on. And and Unilever was open to that. And was that the very reason they reached out to Ben & Jerry's? So they were open to that option?
I don't think that they thought that's where this was going to end. But, if you look at it in hindsight, having this powerful independent board of directors that is sort of primary responsibility for the social mission and the purpose of the company. And then you have Unilever, that's the owner and has the legal responsibility and the primary responsibility for the commercial aspects of the business. Actually, if you look at M&A and ROIs and returns, Ben & Jerry's is right up there as one of the most financially successful acquisitions from a multinational. So probably more pain than they thought up front, but then more gain as we went along.
Totally get it. And How do they find a CEO? What, you were in 2010, you took over as CEO. How do they find someone like you? I mean, that is a unique CEO that they want, right?
It was. I had been in Unilever. I was in Unilever when I took this role, and I would say I was one of those that focused a lot on turnarounds. And I'd actually come to the United States for a turnaround in 2007 to turn around our ice cream business and integrate it and move it around and do all sorts of reshaping of the business. And I could still remember the head of that North American business came to me as I was sort of wrapping up that assignment, and I was sort of happily thinking I'd go back to Europe and get my kids into high school in Europe. Didn't even then really fully fathom how high college fees are in America. I do now that know that, but no, they came to me and they said, "We finally found the right job for you. After all these years, now you can be a rebel, but you can be a rebel with a cause."
There you go. So they were just, yeah, they had the personality, they had the opportunity and brought it together. How did you feel going in? Because, it's interesting. You've said that your ambition was to re-radicalize Ben & Jerry's, which sounds a bit counterintuitive to us because we already thought that they were pretty radical in the spectrum of brands. So, how did you feel going in and why did you feel the need to re-radicalize the brand?
I gotta say, as you go into something as iconic as Ben & Jerry's, you do come in with a certain amount of humility and a little bit like concern if are you going to fit in?
Sure.
Do I exchange my car? What am I going to do? What do I say?
What shirt do you wear on the first day? It says everything,
Exactly, all of this. Now, to be fair, I sort of went in with who I am and what I am. I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve and be pretty transparent. So you get what you see. But what really struck me after the first week was this was not an intellectual hothouse. This was not one of precious ideas and ideology. This was a doing company, a company that is centered around doing, of executing, of really making a difference. But it wasn't like an intellectual process. It was a practical process. And I found that extremely liberating.
That's really interesting because I think a lot of companies would fancy themselves as companies that do, because I think the market rewards that, employees expect it. How did that happen at Ben & Jerry's? Was it a function of Ben & Jerry themselves and they were just so sort of walking their talk, boots on the ground themselves? Or was it organic?
I mean, we have to give a lot of credit to Ben. So if you could say Ben is the permanently dissatisfied with the status quo and having to really ensure that we're doing absolutely everything in our power to make things right, to achieve justice. And then Jerry is the one that makes us all want to work there and be there. So between the two of them, they created this thing. But, Ben really, he wasn't going to do this. He was actually going to get out of the business. And somebody said, well, if you don't like business, if you don't like business people, why don't you make a different business? Why don't you make a business that invests in the community in which it buys its ingredients? Why don't you use your business to speak up? Why don't you use your voice? Why do you have to take this model as given? And you got to remember, this is, in the 80s. I mean, this is when, we wore shoulder pads and, nobody talked about
Sure.
ESG and purpose-led businesses. So it was really a breakthrough set of thinking and then a relentless commitment to justice.
And what you're saying there is really important for those who don't know. Ben & Jerry's characterized itself as a social justice company that happens to make ice cream, not the other way around. And that integrity of intent, where you're a purpose with a company, not a company with a purpose, is so important. And tell us, how does that guide you in all the many decisions that any business, ice cream or otherwise, has to make? I mean, do you look at it through the lens of your social mission first and make the decision on that basis, or is it case by case? What's it like?
No, so back in 1988, they had a very high energy board meeting, and they were going to try to define the mission of Ben & Jerry's, the three-part mission. And as all good meetings, everybody gave a lot of input. They all left the room, and one person sat down and wrote it out. And that is still the three-part mission statement of Ben & Jerry's today.
Wow.
And that is a three-part mission plus, a couple of cheats. So you basically got the environmental mission. which is the product mission. So make the absolutely best possible product in the most natural way with the least environmental impact. That's the product mission. Only successful companies have an impact. Only successful companies remain companies. So there's an economic mission to return a fair shareholder return and to be economically viable. And then there is a social mission, which is anchored in and around social justice.
Right.
And then if you take those three pillars, the product, the social, and the economic, that was linked together in this model called linked prosperity. And linked prosperity really goes right back to the farm and says, how can we think about buying our biggest ingredient, cream, in a way that supports the dairy farmers? And think of it as an investment in the dairy community, an investment in the cocoa farmers, an investment in the banana co-op, versus an extraction of economic value. So that was the sort of the model of linked prosperity. And by having that printed up and put in every single room in the company, it means that every single decision in that company could be challenged by any single individual, whether we were adhering.
So everyone was empowered to do that. They had a right to speak up.
Totally.
And you know, let me push in on that a little bit, because, you know, so many companies are piled onto the purpose space, and there's ESG washing, and there's so many funds now and so on. And, you know, with the best of intentions, a lot of companies are playing at it or managing the optics of their brands as opposed to doing it for real. So in your direct experience of CEO of Ben & Jerry's for 8 years, what is the connective tissue between really leaning in and leading with the purpose of your company and the profit and the sale of products? How does that work?
I mean, you actually lay it out quite nicely in your model as well. But the trick is not, it's a top down, the bottom up. And the fact is that when you are on a bigger mission than just making money, when you're on a mission to truly impact the world, when you're taking on the causes and the issues that really matter to your people, the organizational execution power doubles at least. You know, our factories were the most efficient factories in the ice cream world, lowest waste levels, the most committed workforce. And that permeates throughout the company, because we can't afford to waste any ingredients, because we're trying to push that money into the communities that we are here to serve. So it really drives a level of engagement and execution in all elements of the business, from straight operations, finance, normal marketing. So it permeates your whole ecosystem and your partner system and your customers. So in that sense, you know, I saw an incredible lift in just performance, you know, performance per person in the company, impact per person in the company.
And then when you've got this temptation that every company, if they're lucky enough, has, which is, hey, we've got an opportunity to go into a new market, or we can scale here, or the big boys in the industry are trying to kind of muscle us out, and you could compromise the integrity of your social mission to capture that opportunity or play defense. What do you tell yourself at a board level, at a company level?
You will never compromise. You will never compromise on any one of those elements. You might emphasize a bit more or go lead or sequence differently, but you could never do something that compromises. So we would never put out a product that maybe supported a cause with these perfect ingredients from these farms, but the product didn't taste good. Like every time you spend $4 on a pint of Ben & Jerry's, it's got to blow your socks off. There's just no compromise. Same thing on social mission. Will we be actively be able to promote on every cause or speak up on everything? No. But would we do something that undermines it? Absolutely not. So there is there's a keep walking. Don't strive for perfection, but don't undermine your values.
And I'm sure you attract a certain type of employee, people who come to the company because you're so clear-eyed about the role you want to play in the world. But that almost creates a rod for your own back, because there's got to be a lot of internal demand from your employee base, right? And how do you manage that?
Yeah, no, you listen. I mean, you got to do a lot of listening. You got to run fast if you want to stay ahead. and it takes all forms and shapes. We were hit with a very bad storm some years back, and just where I lived, it didn't do a lot of damage, but by our factory in Waterbury, it washed out half the village. So when I showed up for work on Monday, I'm going, where is everyone? And they're in Waterbury. They've got equipment together. They're all down there working with the community to help people restore their homes after the damage. And I was like, whoa. So I had to quickly change clothes, cancel meetings, jump in the car and get there, because you got to be on site to lead. But it's the bottom up movement. Right. So it is a back and forth. I would also say not everybody in the company has to agree to everything. What we got to agree to is once we go, and we go all in.
And it's not always easy to go. I know that you were very sensitive to the fact that when the Black Lives Matter movement became such a, top of mind all around the world, that, you said in the press that you were concerned that how could a majority white led company have an authentic voice in this place? So in this space, how do you, well, obviously you want to lean into that issue, but how do you navigate that issue?
It took 3 years. It took 3 years. It took 1 year of unconscious bias training. It took a year. In that year was lots of different learning journeys, etc. The second year we came out of the shell, and we went to the events, we marched, we talked, we went to meet with the different community centers and organizers. We still messed up, 40% of the time, but they were benevolent and nice to us. And then in year 3, one of our big breakthroughs was we actually went to meet with former Representative John Lewis, and we literally walked in and said, Congressman, what can we do? We're a 96% white company. And he said, what is it that you're here to? He said, well, we want to address systemic and structural racism in America. And he looked at us and he gave us 4 hours. He blew out his whole afternoon. And I don't think I've ever been that inspired and energized about an issue. But that was in 2012. So, it takes time to authentically enter and understand. It takes time as a white person with a white identity, as a male. A lot of identity challenges here to overcome if you want to be a humble part of that movement.
The other area which is so important, beyond engaging consumers around movements, beyond fostering a culture where people feel they have a voice to bring issues and stay true to your mission, is upstream, your own supply chain, having your own house in order. I know that you did a lot of work in and around your suppliers and making sure that, they were treated well, there was no fear of retaliation. Why was that important, and what did you do?
In a way, the front end of Ben & Jerry's is fun, it's pop culture, everything is a smile, everything is about the opportunity and possibility to change the world. The back end of Ben & Jerry's is extremely granular, very metric oriented. So in a way, we were really targeting that each pint should contain the maximum number of ingredient investment in those communities. And, can we get that to 80%, 90%? That there was a program behind that ingredient. So that is really that thing. Now, I can give you another example. Between Ben & Jerry's and my current gig as setting up health and well-being, I led the division of food and beverages in North America. And, you take a brand like Hellmann's, which is, a 100-year-old brand. People sort of think they know it. And we sort of said, well, what are we doing with Hellmann's? What are we all about? What is our role in society? And as I took the job, I was cognizant. I wanted to make sure I went to meet those farmers. There were about 600,000 acres of soybean farmers in Iowa that grows the soybean oil that goes into Hellmann's. So I said, I really want to go there before I go to any customer. So we flew out and we met with the farmers that grow our crop. And based on those discussions, we updated our program in and around cover crop. What we saw was the biggest environmental impact we could have in the production of soybean was the introduction of cover crops. We reduce runoff. We increase organic matter in the soil, so we reduce the chemical load on the farm. But believe it or not, there are 20, 30 different soil types on one farm, the incline of the field, everything matters. So we, based on those discussions, we tweaked our program to say, we're going to pay you, X dollars for the first year, a little bit less the second year, a little bit less the third year, but we're going to share the full cost and more upfront for you to convert to cover cropping. We started that, we partnered with others, we really aimed to get 1 million acres cover crop. That would have such a gigantic impact. If you just even look at the Gulf of Mexico, the runoff, but just the way that the health of that soil and the chemical load. Then we went to our own factory and we looked at the waste profile here. One of the things that will strike you when you stand in a Hellmann's factory is, Americans eat a lot of mayonnaise because it's good, but there's also a lot of plastic. When you're watching that, you're seeing all this. It's plastic. So we said, all right, we're going to convert all our plastic to PCR, post-consumer use plastic. So we trigger a real demand for recycled plastic material. We move up fully away from virgin plastic. We reduce our carbon footprint by 60%. And then we looked also at the waste and the energy use in our own factory, and we looked at optimizing that. When we looked at that, then we turned to the consumer and we said, what role are we playing in their home? What is the biggest problem that we can help address? And it wasn't an easy one. It's actually food waste. 42% of food waste happens in the home. Food waste globally is like the third biggest country when it comes to carbon emission. But how do you find a fun and cheeky way to help people save money, eat better, and reduce the stuff that they throw away, which by the way saves the money. And that was then became the sort of the public facing, having done the farm, having done the plastic, having done the reduction, we then turned to that and we actually launched that with a Super Bowl ad and went all in. And what you'll see is that the net result of this business is just outstanding.
I mean, just the fact that you go all in and then you go to the consumer to capture the ROI of those investments that you've made in those changes. I mean, there's a through line there through the whole value chain of the business that people fail to kind of pull it all the way through so that the work they've done upstream, they can recoup those costs downstream. And then they wonder why these isolated efforts don't work. I want to ask you, at some point after 8 years, someone at Unilever walked up to you and had a similar conversation to the first one they had when they said, take over Ben & Jerry's, and they wanted you to start this new division. What did they say and what was it all about? And why was it necessary? Unilever's enormous. It's leading, as you say. Why?
There's two steps here. One step was, when you do something like this for 8 years, it really becomes you. And your purpose, your mission is intertwined with the company and you live and breathe it. You are it. So I actually started about 6 years in to realize, wait a second, you can't do this forever. This organism has to keep reinventing itself. It needs different impulses and different ways of being. So I actually sort of devised a 2-year process for how to leave Ben & Jerry's. I call it 2+2, 2 years to get out and 2 years in therapy to get over it. So I was very conscious that I wanted Ben & Jerry's to flourish, to grow, to expand beyond my leadership and evolve as an ecosystem. So that was one component, which was hard, and we did a lot of work, and I could move on. I actually then went back and did this division because I wanted to take that model and say, can you really deploy this on old brands, center store, where people sort of said, this can't really be done. And really that's what we did. But that was back in the matrix. It was back in the sort of, so I really love building high impact. And that I sort of feel also after having sold so much mental health through ice cream, I should really sell mental and physical health. Right. So my passion was really around how do we build a high impact, human-centered health business. And we built that up rather quickly. We acquired we acquired a few other businesses rather quickly, and we now have a sizable portfolio. So I then joined in last summer, basically, to set this up and create this as a collective of powerful companies that are there to serve their consumers and their communities.
And when you're building that portfolio and building something special, do you reverse engineer out of consumer needs and changing expectations and so on? Or do you start with the purposeful brands that are leading their category and then build your stable of brands that way? Or is it both? Which end do you lead with?
It's so, the beauty of being a purpose-led company is you kind of attract like-minded people. So all the companies that have joined our collective and that we've acquired had at their core a mission and a purpose that was meaningful. Right. Now, were they living it in all aspects of their business? No, nobody is. Everybody's on a journey. But each one of them had something very, very special and something very, very unique. And by putting ourselves together and think about how do we really now keep extending this model in different ways, because it's a different industry. That's what we're trying to bring to the industry.
And what's the gap you're trying to fill? Because obviously there's a brief in terms of the type of companies you're trying to acquire, and it's a very crowded space. So did you see a massive opportunity in there that wasn't being met?
Well, a couple of things. We believe that you have to move from this idea of I'm sick, I need something, to how do you remain healthy, or how do you excel at your health goals? So that is really moving from sort of a reactive state to a lifestyle of health. That was the first point. So the second point is most things that are joyous and fun stick. So that may be a little Ben and Jerry-esque, but if it's something that brings a smile to your face, you're probably going to keep doing it. If it's something that self-perpetuates and gives you positive reinforcement. So how do we bring joy to health? Was the other aspect. And then thirdly, I think what we saw was that the industry was moving towards us. People were looking away from letters and chemical formulations for a pack to like, I'm trying to solve this problem. Stress, sleep, and how can we help solve those problems? And that was sort of part of that journey. And it's about how you bring in the thinking of, you could say, fast-moving consumer goods to health.
And is there anything else you're taking away from Ben and Jerry's? I mean, I think Ben and Jerry paid you the highest compliment in a New York Times article where they said you helped Ben and Jerry's rediscover its soul. I mean, that there could be no higher praise, but yet here you are building a family of brands for the first time. How do you invest young companies, new companies, a collection of companies with that sort of shared heart, shall we say?
Well, the soul of a company is its people. They're saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. Culture is just another name for its people. And what we are doing in our setup here is we're very much keeping the people and their mission alive. So we're not integrating them into like a common set of values and missions. Each one remain on their value and mission. They're just getting a little extra oomph from being supported and helped along the journey, but it's their journey. I think that's the key. It's their journey. And that's the soul of each one of these companies. And that's what we believe other people are attracted to.
Yeah, because, this new sort of parent experience can't suffocate what made them so special in the first place. I have to ask, at the enterprise level, as a true sustainability leader for so long, Unilever faces the challenge of always being held accountable to this higher bar it sets for itself. And I've read in various places that, representatives have said that it's hard to meet your sustainability goals when the industry isn't lifting itself up at the same time. There's only so much that you can do as an individual enterprise or an individual company inside the enterprise. So if you want to be a leader today, what do you think you need to do? Do you need to really embrace pre-competitive collaboration? Do you need to work cross-sector? Do you need to advocate for changes with the industry itself? And how important is that in the mix of all the other things that we've touched on if you really want to be a leader?
So I think all of the things you listed are a firm yes, and none of them are an excuse for you not stepping up and taking accountability and responsibility for your own house. I think accountability is a gift. It's a gift that sharpens you and drives you forward. I think perfection is highly overrated. It's about also recognizing we're not perfect and own it. I have gone to so many activists and partners and said, look, we're not perfect. We're trying to do this thing. We're sort of like, I don't know, 50, 60%, but we're in. Nobody cares. Nobody's expecting perfection. So right. I think that's part of the sort of the trap here is that, if we don't do these things, cross collaboration, government policy, we can't really do anything because we won't make a difference. Not true. You will make a difference. Holding yourself accountable, yes, but don't be scared of not being perfect. Act with intent. Act with clarity around your mission, but don't be scared that you're not 100% there, because you're never going to be 100% there.
That sort of begs a final question I want to ask Jostein, which is, leadership today could not be more different than how it was 5 or 10 years ago, but even more so because of the last couple of years. We have the climate crisis, we have, the BLM movement, we have COVID and all its variants. How would you characterize purposeful, effective leadership moving forward? What do we need to be? How do we need to show up? How do we need to think?
Many things come to mind, but servant leadership is, I think, is one of the aspects of this. The future of companies and the systems that will create the change in our capitalist setup is all about collaboration. And leaders who try to lead through content and telling, that is very passé. It is about servant leadership. It is about an incredible amount of listening and taking on board. It's about creating the conditions around these incredibly passionate people that you have in your company that can do incredible things so that they can get on and do it, that they can be it and live the mission, the purpose, and the values of the company. They sort of figure out the rest. So it is a sense of letting go of some of the old style controls, but you get so much back. In terms of, because people feel that accountability because they're trying to do something bigger. So I do think leaders have to be humble, have to be in service of their organizations, communities, the impact that they're trying to achieve, have to be extremely active listener, and have to be willing to change when circumstances change, and no room for egos.
Jostein, I want to thank you for being such a damn fine example of doing it right with true integrity, and it puts everyone else on notice. And once you see it and you see the success it can drive, you can't unknow it. And you've done that, Ben & Jerry's, you've done it at Unilever, and now with the new health and wellness division. So thank you for the leadership. Thanks for sharing the insights today. And we look forward to seeing what you're going to do with all these new companies.
Watch this space. It's been great fun, Simon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jostein. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Lead with We. And you can find out more information about today's guest, Jostein Solheim, in the description below. And if you enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Lead with We is produced by Goal 17 Media, and you can listen to all the episodes on Apple, Google, or Spotify. And if you're looking to go even deeper into the world of purposeful business, check out my new book, Lead with We, that's now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Google Books. See you on the next episode, and until then, let's all lead with We.